Thank you. That's very, very kind introduction. I'll try not to get weirded out by the fact that I've got this microphone on me. So, I think I'll start out by telling you just a little bit of how I got started, and then we'll go through some slides and talk about some things. But it may make a little bit more sense if I talk to you about my evolution a little bit. And Matthew touched on that a little bit. But I did. I started as an intern at the TV assignment desk, which is, if you're familiar with a television assignment desk, it's where they listen to all of the police and fire and emergency scanners. It's where the phone rings and people are calling to either complain about what Nadine Wimmer is wearing tonight, or they have tips. We get all of the press releases through the assignment desk in a lot of ways. Email, they're looking at Twitter, they're watching, they're basically surveying for news. But assignment desk also sends out the reporters with photographers, or decides, oh, hey, that thing that's happening right now on the scanner at this address might be worth a photographer, so we better go check that out. That was pretty hard to start as an intern on the TV assignment desk, because it is not just high pressure, but it is a high pressure people environment. So imagine, if you will, a seasoned photographer coming to this jerk intern who doesn't know what she's doing, and she's telling me that I've got to go check out this fire that probably is in a dumpster at the corner of 7th South and 10th East. Well, there's a lot of pushback, if you can't guess. And it didn't take me very long to learn that I have to stop being intimidated by all of these people who are coming to me and saying, what, do you even know if it's news? And replied back with, well, guess what? The pay is the same. It took me about 2 weeks. And then I was able to feel like I could and needed to stand up to reporters who didn't want to go, or photographers who didn't want to go, or reporters who didn't want to go with that photographer, and just deal with all of the drama associated with people so that we could get the dang job done, right? So it was a great place to learn about news and whether I had the chops to do broadcast news. The job didn't lend itself right away to reporting. In fact, it was hard for me to get recognized. I would write up a script for the show, and I would say, hey, producer, you probably want to look at this. Look what I wrote. And it was hard for me to get recognized doing that. And I would express frustration to the news director, and he'd say, well, you kind of need to go to a small market in order to get a shot at reporting around here, because Salt Lake is a larger market. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do that, because I had family. I had 2 little kids by then. I was a non-traditional student at the time at the University of Utah. And I knew that I couldn't leave market. So I looked over at the radio department, which was really close to the assignment desk. We're in the same room. And said, hey, there's a radio reporter opening. Applied for, and they took a look at my writing, and I made a demo. I had never been on the radio before. I made a demo, and they hired me. And I was instantly doing radio reporting, which turns out is a fantastic way in to journalism. And you can do some really great work in audio. So that's how I got in. It's relevant because as I talk about the way disruption is changing us, I want you got to keep in mind that as I evolve through, it's actually helping me as we evolve through the disruption that's happening. So that's a throwaway slide. So wanted to talk about OTT first. How many of you know what OTT stands for? It means over the top. And what OTT is actually over the top of the TV. So it's your Apple TV app. it's Roku, it's the Amazon Fire, it's any device that will let you view. So it's over the top, over the top of the television, basically is what it means. So we're going to talk about OTT, a little bit of disruptive TV technology. We're going to talk about radio and some things that are happening in radio, particularly KSL News Radio. And we'll talk about speakers, how speakers are changing things a little bit, and some podcasting. And then I'll throw in some of the things that journalism is doing as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So OTT, if you'll notice from this fancy pie chart, Salt Lake City is actually heavy in OTT consumption. So the Salt Lake City DMA actually includes the Logan area and most of the state, FYI. So you can see 42% of Salt Lake City residents stream more than an hour of video a day. That's probably not a shock to you. As the younger you go, the higher that number gets as far as streaming. On average, how many of, so you can see from the chart, it's a lot. Salt Lake City is the number 1 streaming DMA index in the US. So we do a lot of it. This is why you got to get out in front of stuff like this, because if it's not your station doing this type of thing, then it's something else. It's Netflix, it's Amazon Prime Video, it's all of the things, all of the places, YouTube, right? And you can see, so why? Why Utah? Why is that such a big deal here? Why is OTT a big deal? Well, the theories are we have a younger demographic, and the younger demographic is more likely to stream. We have Silicon Slopes, which is, if you're unfamiliar, that is that section of Happy Valley that is, so it's Utah County, and where Salt Lake County and Utah County align, and there are a lot of tech companies that are evolving there. So they call it Silicon Slopes. And people are frugal, so they don't want to pay for cable, so they cut the cable. So you get OTT when you do that. So we have created a KSL app. So when I say we, I mean the KSL we's is in KSL Television and KSL News Radio. This is KSL Television's app, and the focus is not necessarily on text, it's on video in this case. 18% of the views on this app are video on demand. %76% of the views are live broadcasting. Now you'll see that you've got KSL News Radio in the middle of that. And we've done some seasonal streams, like we had a Yule log that played FM 100 music. So FM 100 music is in the Bonneville companies. It is during Christmas time playing all Christmas music. So you've got your Yule log with so people would turn that on and go do their other things, right? So they're not really watching the Yule log, but if they're going to be listening to FM 100 anyway, there you go. KSL News Radio actually gets a big chunk of that viewing/listening time. We have webcams in our radio studio, which people have been doing that for years, so what's the big deal? We have a TV switcher that you can also insert lower thirds and graphics and video. So, and it's not staffed 24/7. We staff that switcher when there's something special to show. Say we had Mitt Romney was on today, for example. We have Mitt Romney on. We will make sure we staff it so that we can, throw up stats or throw up lower thirds so that we can record that, head tail it, throw it up on social, and make sure the audience who didn't get to see that knows that it happened and knows that we exist. So people might be watching that or listening to that, and they turn that on and go do the dishes or go do other things, because that's how people watch a lot of television, and this is essentially radio, right? But it's drawing in a lot of view time, or in the radio world, time spent listening is what we call it, TSL. If you guys feel like you want to ask me a question, feel free to raise your hand. Yes?
What devices does this app currently on?
Well, I may miss one,
Okay.
but it's on Apple TV, the Fire, Amazon Fire, the Roku, and there's probably another one I'm missing. But we're trying to be in all of the places, right? So a lot of cool things happening. We also just launched a partnership with the Real Salt Lake. So we are streaming all of the RSL games now through this app. So feel free to download it. But partnerships like that, and you get viewing from that, and people discover you through that. So that's the way you do it. If you're going to be disrupted in this space, you ought to be disrupting yourself. Radio and OTT. I talked about this a little bit already. So we call it radio you can see. Why radio that you can see? Why bother with video on the radio? Well, we know that driverless cars are coming, so some of radio's future is going to be video, because people won't have to just listen and drive. They'll be able to look at other things, and if you're riding mass transit, that's already happening for you. You can already do that. Cars will have screens and bigger screens, and people will want to watch more content is the prediction, right? So you have opportunity here. Hey, I thought I turned my email off. Guess not.
I actually love seeing all the notifications.
Oh, yeah?
Morgan Pratt is one of our Aggies.
Hey,
so that was cool to see.
Go Morgan.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
cool to see
so
her coming
sorry
out.
about that. How absolutely amateur of me. And I'm not even going to I'm not going to bother to turn it off now, so you can enjoy that. Anyway, so this is why we're even dabbling in video at all. And I would suggest we're probably doing more than dabbling at this point. Okay? Live stream Snipes. So I mentioned lower thirds, but we're also making money off of this, right? So you can see that that is actually a visual ad that is now something that we can do. So this doesn't just exist on the OTT app. It also exists on our listening app, the KSM News Radio app, and our website. So we're able to create a brand new revenue stream without changing the product really at all. Now I do have to staff someone to run the switcher and to actually put the Snipe up, but it's not a lot of work. Yes?
So then are you catering more of your radio content towards like a podcast/web-based then, or are you still trying to keep it traditional?
Well, so that's an interesting question, because we'll talk a little bit more about podcasting coming up, and it's okay, you can jump ahead, it's all right. It's okay. So podcasting is very different from radio listening, and the key to doing podcasting well is to realize it's very different from radio listening. It is not the same at all, and you should not treat it the same, or you're doing it wrong, right? And then the other part of your question was?
Are you catering more towards
Podcasting or?
more traditional?
Well, so you have to separate the two. So we'll get to podcasting later. This is catering to available audience and people who are in it for the what's happening right now, or if we're in a talk show, what are people talking about? If I need some weather or traffic information during our news shows, which are at morning drive and PM drive focused. We do have a little noon show there. You're talking about commodity news, right, at that point? Because people can find out about something that's happening just by going online and going, and just searching it, right? You can find out a lot about what's going on just by watching Twitter a Twitter hashtag, for example. So I call it commodity news, and I almost hate to call it that because it hurts me a little bit to think about journalism as a commodity. But that utility type stuff really is, and everybody has it. So you have to be really good at it, but it's very different from doing a podcast, for example, that you could spend more time with, either in investigative news space or in niche talk spaces. So that's a good question. But that's how my life has been, is to try to split between the live right now timeliness product versus the not tied to necessarily right now what's happening, niche, hyper-focused into a topic or category type content. But it's fun. It is so fun to have both of those worlds to play in. So, yeah. Okay, and you were a great segue. So we have 65 plus shows right now, and frankly, that's too many. It's a lot. What I'm going through right now is to streamline what we have, raise the quality of what we have, because we said yes to a lot of podcasters and said, you want a podcast? Great, go right ahead. And then I'm finding out a month or two later, or several months down the road, that they've only done an episode. So that's too many. And I wouldn't say that of these. That's an exaggeration a little bit. But we do have some cleaning up to do. We'll probably narrow that down to 50 before we expand again. But you can see from some of the stuff we have. Now, we call some of our podcasts our actual on-air shows. And that's not really a podcast in the traditional sense. That's just time shifting for people, right? So the movie show, for example, gets put into a podcast because it's something that people will likely still want to listen to even if they missed it on the air, right? And you can time shift and listen at your convenience. So that is what I would call a time shifted show. You can see Ethan and Alex in their pilgrim outfits. That was their Thanksgiving episode show art. They used to be on the radio station. They had a show called The Nightside Project. They are no longer on the station. They are in the digital-only space. And they still do shows, and they are one of our top digital-only shows. You see that we have Hosts of Eden, which is a fictional podcast. It's a sci-fi podcast written by one of our hosts, our talk show hosts. He's into sci-fi. Who knew? He doesn't talk about sci-fi on the air necessarily. So he has done that. We have another one that's not listed here called It's a Gentle Thief, and that was written by Amanda Dixon. It was actually a book. She's now recorded that to a book on tape, and we're using that as a podcast. It's fiction. So this is a whole new area for us because we're not limited to news. We're not limited to talk, and you shouldn't treat it like either. But there are sponsors to be had for this content, and there is audience for this content. So this is how you disrupt yourself. But people who are familiar and who love Jay McFarland, who wrote Hosts of Eden, or Amanda Dixon, their fans want to listen to this stuff because they are super fans, right? So this is one of the ways we get at that. Fan Effect is one of my favorite podcasts, and it's a bunch of guys who like sci-fi and comic book movies and a whole different genre of fandoms getting together and chatting. So it's one of my favorite ones. Okay, any questions about that? Okay. Yeah.
What do you think is the optimal number of podcasts for a station to keep? Because you said you wanted to pare down and then expand again,
Yes.
but you didn't say exactly where you expanded.
So we need to pare down at this point because what we're getting isn't the quality that I need. I don't know if I have a good answer for that question because if I'm allowed more resources, then we'll be able to expand a lot better. Right now I have a limited team I have, let's see, in the digital space there are about 4 full-timers and we have several part-timers. So if we're allowed more resource, then we'll have more ability to expand. But I need to spend more of my time on the successful ones and the ones that are actually generating good content. So it's just a matter of, okay, that's not doing anything. The host is not passionate like they said they were. And the quality isn't what it needs to be. So we need to cut our losses and move on. And stop supporting that because it's not necessarily succeeding. Now that sounds very harsh because I actually love podcasting and think if you want to do a podcast, you should do it. And you should do that whether you have a partnership through a media company or not. But if you want to do it, you should do it. Don't just let it sit for months and months, right? You should be passionate and be doing it, right? So I don't have a good answer for that, but I guess the answer is how many resources does it take, and if I have enough resources to pull it off.
And how much resource does it give back to you?
If the quality is good, that is all I personally am worried about. There are other people there worried about the money that's coming in. Now, that's not to say that we can just ignore whether something makes money. But I could tell you, for example, we're doing a podcast with the FBI, and we can't have a sponsor with that because the FBI wouldn't do it with us if we had a sponsor attached to that. And frankly, there are places where, I'm not as keen on having a sponsorship either, you know what I'm saying? That's about to launch, and we're doing that because it's cool content, it's informative. And I hope people will like it, but my goal in doing it is having fun with a cool podcast. We interviewed FBI agents and in different topic areas, like we interviewed the counterintelligence guy. We interviewed this guy he's retired now, but he was an undercover agent, and fascinating guy. The dude got a tattoo as part of his cover. And after the assignment, he kept it because he's just that committed to what he did and is proud of what he did. He infiltrated a militia group in Idaho and basically stopped them from building bombs to blow up police officers who would respond to a 911 call. So, fascinating stories, right? I'm not going to worry about whether that makes money because it's cool content. So, and luckily, I'm not the one who has to worry about that. I have a counterpart who worries about business development and the money that's coming in. So, my job is to make the best content possible so that we can be profitable, right? Okay. Podcast consumption, you can see it is just going like this. It's not going down. More people are consuming podcasts than ever. And this tells you people will click on a podcast and play it right away. We're seeing the trajectory has already overtaken desktop playing. It's all mobile, guys. Mobile all the way for podcasts, which makes a ton of sense. I'm going to talk about smart speakers for a minute. How many of you own a Dot? A few of you. Okay. How do you use it? Are you streaming? What are you streaming when you stream? When you're listening to that?
Stuff.
Yeah.
I'm usually using them like through Spotify and stuff like that.
So you're streaming through an app?
Yeah.
Cool. Right on. Yeah.
Well, I have Google Home, but I use it for like news in the morning and then podcasts as well.
Right on. So you're streaming news, you're getting
Various sources.
your podcasts. Are you guys using it to run your lights and stuff too? No, not yet.
Events.
I have one, but I haven't hooked it up to my house yet because she can hear me, and it's really freaky. But sometimes I just unplug it because it's a little unsettling here. It's But you can stream radio stations through it. You can get your flash briefing through it. Amazon has been a big play for us, but we're starting to creep into the Google Home space as well. And this is, so this is what's happening in the Salt Lake DMA. So 2% of the national average echo will listen so TLH is total listening hours, so 2% is the national average across the country. 19% is what Bonneville Salt Lake's average is post-Christmas. So these are the Bonneville markets. So you see what happened after Christmas. That is huge. So I think what's happening on the Amazon for us is the same thing that's happening with the OTT. And right now we're just theorizing because we don't know for sure why it's taken off so well. We have a strategy. We're telling people that we're on there. But 20% of our streaming accounted to the Amazon Alexa is kind of high. So we're proud of that. Now these are other really big markets, so we're not sure why it's not doing better, for example, in San Francisco or Seattle. They're doing well. But this tells you that the world is changing, and you got to change too. So 1 in 6 now own a smart speaker in the U.S. 7% got it over Christmas. Whew, I didn't mean to do that yet. 71% of smart speaker owners consume more audio than ever before. So this is not bad news for radio. The bad news that might be for radio is that it's more podcasting now. Not that it's all podcasting, not that podcasting has overtaken radio, but a lot of the growth is in podcasting. 52% keep their speakers in the living room, and 64% want the smart speaker technology in their cars. So it's coming. And now we can have our mobile guy. So I mentioned mobile phones a little bit before. My strategy for several years now has been mobile first. And we're doing a lot more with push notifications, with our app now that we're able to deep link, which we weren't able to do until just this year, which is silly. But we're doing a lot more with mobile phones because that's where people live. Oh, you can't, that's kind of an eye chart. Sorry, guys. Didn't realize it would be so small. This is a crowd Tangle chart that we pulled. So how many of you are familiar with crowd Tangle? Yeah? Crowd Tangle is, it's actually owned by Facebook, and basically what it does is give you viral alerts on viral content, and guess what? Something just came in my email. So it will tell you what is viral, but it's also helping newsrooms to see trends, and they have a lot of intelligence that you can glean from that. What we're finding is most of the comments that were made to our Facebook page in Q1 of this year were made by 25 to 34-year-olds who were on their mobile phones. So that's within the key demographic that radio stations look for, and they're on their cell phones. So it shouldn't be a shock to anyone. Of course not this group, right? Okay? So mobile is big. So what do we do? What do we do with all of this digital information? Well, I hope it's been a little bit Captain Obvious. It has been, to this group especially. You need to do a few things. You can use that radio platform to help you. I'm going to show you this. So I mentioned the Nightside Project a little bit earlier. So we have something that the Nightside Project does, and they do it on the traditional radio station on Fridays during our morning show, which is our biggest show. So it's our most heavily listened to show, and it's news-based, and it's Friday, so it's kind of fun. but we'll give them a quiz. So they come on and they play for one of their podcast listeners, and whoever wins gets a prize for their podcast listener. But they'll do things like, some of the questions they're kind of snarky and have a funny bent to them. And we'll play shamelessly, we'll play the He-Man audio, I have the power, to whoever who wins. But the play there is to drive audience from terrestrial to the podcast, which is cool. And then guess what? They segment off that piece of the show will go into the Nightside Project's podcast as well. So you can get it both through the morning news product and through the Nightside Project podcast. So kind of cool. And we're deploying strategies like that all of the time. Another strategy is for podcasts to have other podcast hosts on and interview them, because what we're finding is people who listen to podcasts are more apt to listen to another podcast. So if they hear a different podcaster on one of the podcasts that they're listening to, they're more likely to listen to that other podcast and try it out, because that's kind of how podcasters are cutting through. We have a really cool, I'm going to put up this slide right now. Fake news. That made me laugh when I saw it, and it's probably the only time I've heard the word fake news and laughed, because I think that's a horrible thing that's happened for journalism, to have people call us fake news and to have it take off. It's been really frustrating to me as somebody who's worked in journalism. But because podcasts have this ability to go deep, and we do have the ability to go deep on radio, you can do that. Not as easily done in a commercial, drive time broadcast, but we do it in our talk shows quite a bit. We'll have the reporter on to talk about a story and play a 5-minute piece. It doesn't happen very much, but we'll be doing more of it in the podcast space. And that is going to be good for journalism, in my view. I have a really exciting investigative news podcast coming out this year. It's going to take a while because this type of investigative reporting takes a while. But the good news is I'm being given that resource to do it. It won't launch until September, and he's been working it for over a year. It's going to be epic when he's able to launch. So, but this is the type of thing that's being done. How many of you have heard of The Daily by the New York Times? It's a big one, yeah. I recommend that you listen to that. Now, the Times is able to do that because they have a giant staff of excellent reporters who they are taking and interviewing each weekday, and taking some of that audio and using production drops from, just broadcast news or wherever to spice it up a little bit. But it is fantastic reporting because they are going in deep and doing it every day. And this is the type of thing that's possible. So it's very exciting. So the antidote for the word fake news is more and better reporting. And we can do that. We can do that. And boom goes the dynamite. That's all I have for today. So I am available for questions. Don't clap. Yeah, do questions. How much time do we have, Matt?
We have 23 minutes.
Oh, plenty of time. Questions?
Sorry, quick announcement. Food stampers, take a photo. You'll need it.
Pose.
Take a photo. I'll take a photo while you take a photo.
Can I leave with a question that I have a personal vested interest in?
Yes.
I heard you say, in referring to your effort to move from the assignment desk to radio, that they took a look at your writing.
They did.
What did they want to see in your writing?
I'm not sure what they wanted to see in it, because the radio station took a look at my writing and said, oh, that's good. What I didn't do is go out with a photographer and do a full-fledged story, which I guess, is the depth and the video end of things that the TV station was looking for.
Can I rephrase my question?
Yes.
How much less interested in you do you think they might have been if your writing sucked?
How much less interested? They wouldn't have hired me. It wouldn't have mattered if I sounded good on the radio. If you sound good saying, using bad phrases and poor English, it's not going to matter because you can't clean up that, right? If you can't use good grammar, or if you can't write, then they would not have been interested in me.
Thank you.
And guess what? That is times 100 now, because now it's not just the radio that you're going to be on. You'll be writing for the website and a lot of other places as well, and you need to be able to present well in all of those places. And website requires a lot more rigor in writing and grammatical prowess than the radio station does. So,
Thank you.
yep. Yeah.
With this investigative podcast that you mentioned, how often do you think that you're going to be able to release a series? Because I think of it like you mentioned with the Daily, they do it a little bit more often, but then you also look at, on the other hand, where it's serial, where they're kind of a more like once a year kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which of those do you?
So this podcast is more like the serial model in that it will be a season that drops, but we'll replicate that with different cases, for example, or different stories.
Yeah. So you'll release an episode.
It will be a
every-
season drop, which is the way for example, the hosts of Eden. We dropped that all as a season, although we're on season 2. The first season rolled out. This time we just dropped it all so people can binge if they wanted to, and we're trying to decide, which way was better. But it ends right. It has a episode 1 and an episode 10, and then you're done for a while. So the investigative podcast will be that, but we're also looking at replicating the New York Times model with the Daily. The challenge is we don't have as many reporters as the New York Times has.
Yeah.
So it'd be a little bit harder for us to replicate on a daily basis. So right now we're looking at, is it twice a week or once a week for us to do that? But we're looking at replicating that too. Anyone else? I can't be all of the questions. Yeah.
Do you have any other podcasts you would recommend?
There's one that the Vox has that I've checked out. It's called Today Explained. And it actually comes out I think they release in the afternoon. They are a little bit more irreverent than the Times. So you have to be aware of that. There's probably going to be an F-bomb every once in a while. So you have to be aware of that. So that's one I would recommend, and the rest of it depends on what your interest is, right? If you're interested in politics, there's one called Pod Save America, which is very popular and very good. It just depends on what your preferences are. There's a podcast for everyone, yeah.
So you kind of talked about it a little bit, but wondering if you can go into more detail. How do you decide what goes on just digital media or just on your website versus what goes on the air?
So I work very closely with the program director, and had for most of my tenure at KSL, was working with, so there's the PD and the ND, so the program director and the news director. I was news director for a good long time. So I have a really close relationship with him. So I can tell him, hey, this podcaster would be great on the air. And we're actually looking at that situation now with one of our sports podcasts. And he'll actually be on the air tonight because the Utah Jazz are playing tonight. And yeah, so we're having a special show with Scott Mitchell, who you may or may not know. Scott Mitchell was a University of Utah quarterback who became a Miami Dolphins quarterback, who became a Detroit Lions quarterback. So he has a podcast called Helmets Off. And that podcast is actually running through the 103.5 The Arrow, which is a classic rock radio station. So here you have a music station entering the spoken word arena through a podcast. So it's kind of a total mind shift for them. But they're able to do it now. They're in the spoken word space because of that. Scott Mitchell is good. He'll be on the air tonight with Alex Curie of the Nightside Project. And they'll be talking jazz for a couple of hours leading up to the jazz game. So kind of fun. Kind of fun. But that's how it happens is I'll notice, hey, so-and-so is really good. And then what they'll do is they'll promote Scott Mitchell's podcast tonight on the air. So if somebody is listening because sports value and wants to know about and hadn't heard that Scott Mitchell has a podcast, they're going to be excited to hear that. We also have a podcast we've launched called Jazz Notes, which it's in its infancy. So there aren't a ton of episodes yet, but they're talking Utah jazz. Yeah.
A lot of us here we specialize in print, PR, and then broadcast, which is basically just video. What is the most gratifying experience being in radio you've seen, opposed to those individual kind of categories you'd see?
The most gratifying experience in radio. Well, for me, it's been a blur of those categories. I've been pushing digital on radio for a long time, for the radio station. So if I had to narrow it down into most gratifying, if you win the Edward R. Murrow Award, which is kind of the biggest deal in broadcasting awards for radio stations and TV stations, although TV have the Emmys as well. But Murrow is really what is considered the gold standard in journalism. Those have been fantastic. In fact, I know that we won some regionals that haven't even been announced yet. I know this because they emailed them to me today because I'm the Region 3 director board member for RTDNA. So I know that we've won some more. And that's super exciting. So that's very gratifying. But in addition, I would have to say, seeing Radio You Can See take off. You should know that is the third time I've tried to get that product noticed, to get it to work, and it finally has. I wouldn't call the first 2 times failures, but they kind of were because they didn't really take off. People just kind of went, yeah, the camera's on, okay. Or, well, the first time they were like, what, you're putting a camera in? Why are you doing that? I have a face for radio. Or, I didn't sign up for that. I signed up for radio. I don't want a camera on me. So it took me a while to get people to stop shutting off the cameras. So no wonder it doesn't take off if the cameras aren't even on, you know. But this is the third time. It's finally working. And working in a way that, I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't my idea to sell banners across the bottom, but I'm glad somebody thought of it because now it makes money. It's paid for itself. And by the way, it didn't cost that much because I had done these baby steps here with no budget until we got to a place where we could maybe spend a couple thousand for cameras and then a little bit more than that for the switcher. So that's been very gratifying to me personally to see that take off because the first 2 tries might have been considered failures. Yeah.
What do you recommend to women in this industry and how we can, be successful?
Women in this industry and how you can be successful. Well, don't quit. Don't stop trying. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't. Demonstrate that you can. Get your work in front of people. And if someone tells you that, your work isn't quite good enough, try another platform. Yeah, that's basically what I would recommend because you can. And, it's just a matter of keeping at it. And try different people. If someone tells you no, try someone else. Try someone else, try someone else, try someone else's boss. You just keep trying. And call me. I'm happy to help you navigate that because we need more ladies in the industry. Although we're doing relatively well. Anyone else? Yeah.
about smart speakers and Alexa and all that. You were given some numbers?
Yes.
Can you repeat those real quick at what year it was? It was the Christmas before 2017?
No, it was 2017. All of the numbers that you were looking at were 2017 numbers. So this is December of 2017.
Oh, it's December of 2017. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yep. So Bonneville is the parent company to us, and they own stations in Phoenix, Denver, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Seattle. The California stations, Sacramento and San Francisco, we're actually in negotiations to buy them still. That deal won't be inked until the end of this year. But yeah, so those are our stations. I couldn't speak for the rest of the industry on how they're doing with smart speakers, but this was impressive to me. Yes?
Do you think those numbers translate the fact that people are buying them for Christmas?
Absolutely.
And do you think that the market, you guys have such a good market, you guys market the radio station well enough that, let me listen to the FM 100?
Yeah.
Is that part of it?
That was a part of the strategy. We have on-air promos that say, hey, you can listen to us on the Alexa. We've been doing that for probably a year.
Did they not market that as well in the other markets?
I don't know. I can tell you that they weren't as aggressive at it as we were, and we were pretty aggressive about getting our news and traffic and weather, frankly, in flash briefings, so that the people who know how to use a flash briefing could actually use them. Amazon needs to do a better job of making them a lot easier to use, because a lot of people just pull it out of the box and plug it in and call it good.
Do you think the branding, the stability of the station or the newsroom you work in has a lot to do with that as well too? You guys have, FM 100 has been around since I've been listening to this. My mom, my grandma, they've all been listening to it.
Yeah.
It's just always there.
Right.
Do you think that has a lot to do with it as well?
Oh, I think it does. I think it does. I can tell you the majority of that number is KSL News Radio. And KSL News Radio has been incredibly aggressive about making sure people know that the station exists in that format, that you can get what you need there. We've been providing news briefings for probably a year. So we're in the space. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but we've frustrated our television counterpart in that if you say, Alexa, play KSL, it will play the radio station, not the TV station. So as Amazon releases the Echo Show, which is a video product, and you say that to it, it will play the radio station. So we've got to work that out, and we will, but you know.
So another question. So
Yeah.
with all these, we have this legacy, the going digital.
Mm-hmm.
So what skills can our students walk out of here with that's going to make them better suited for this new market?
Well, I can tell you in a lot of ways you already have the skills for it, right? So you already know how to use a GIF. You already know how to Photoshop faces onto, you have to be careful for copyright violations, FYI. So you already know how to do that. So you come with a lot of these skills. What I would suggest is that you learn, I know it's going to sound old school, but you got to learn the journalism part of it. You got to learn verification. You got to learn the storytelling part of it, because that is going to be what separates you guys out. You already come with the digital things that you need. You already know social. You already know video editing better than I do. You already know the principles of audio editing because you know video editing, right? You've got to do the basics so that you can take journalism into these new places, right? So that's my best advice to you is get those basics down so that you can be the future, because you can. You absolutely can. Does that make sense?
And that's a great place to stop.
Okay.
Thank you so very much.
You bet.